Toby is going to speak to us about feeling better and managing stress from the ground up. Toby?
Thanks, Kate. So this is a perfect segue because so many of the things that all of you have said and what Darren was saying in his presentation really speak to what I'm about to speak to. I won't go on and on about my background, but I do want you to know that in my off-farm job, I work as a therapy counselor, and I'm a social worker by profession, and I've been doing this work for a long time. And I've come to a place where I'm working a lot with folks, almost primarily in a somatic kind of way, in order to manage stress and anxiety and to deal with trauma. All of those things tend to be connected. Although I'm not suggesting that someone has to have a lot of trauma to have anxiety, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I just wanted to put that out there, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But the reason it's a good segue is because we're really talking on every possible level, I think, and I think we talk about this so much in the NFU, and it's one of the reasons that I love to be a part of the organization and what me to your drew me to the NFU in the first place is that we're talking about holistic ways of healing systems, healing organisms, healing soil, healing agricultural communities, healing all of the ways that we do our work, and healing things not only on a local or a nuclear family level for us, but healing things regionally and provincially and globally. And so this makes a lot of sense to me. And what I was going to start by saying is, here's my theory. Because I also realize that we talk a lot about physical and mental health, and we're especially talking a lot about mental health during the COVID pandemic. But we know these conversations are not new, but being in the middle of a global pandemic does put another spin on all of this. It adds a whole other element. And what I was going to start out by saying is that my theory is that health is health. If we look at any other culture, we will find, or not any other culture, many cultures, many traditions outside of the Western world and inside it increasingly, but especially outside. And I'm thinking particularly about, this long, rich tradition of Chinese medicine where health is seen as health. Health is health. It's not a separate, these aren't separate entities, that our whole health, our whole cellular health is very, very important when it comes to what we identify as mental health and mental well-being, because they are not disconnected. And so I would like to say that I truly believe, and it's been my experience over the last 55 years, but especially over the last 20 years in doing the work that I do, that we come by our problems honestly. And I say that in the context of our lives in agriculture and our lives as eaters and our lives as NFU members and supporters, because what affects us on a global and federal and regional and community and family level, we have an embodied experience of that because we are sensory beings. We have evolved alongside of all of the other beings. And I've been thinking also a lot about this notion or the idea or the talk about how we've made such a mess of things here as a species, and how the planet would be better off without us, and how maybe we're just this parasite that showed up that shouldn't be here, and things will go on without us, and so forth and so on. But actually, evolutionarily, that is not true. And so, and I want to talk a little bit about the science of feeling better and the science of connection, because we have evolved alongside of all other living beings. And I I think that's important. It's important for me to remember, because if I see myself as outside of that circle of life, then I also see myself as outside of my responsibility in making things better. And I also will tend to feel quite helpless, which isn't really good for my health, about what I'm going to do next, because we have a lot of work ahead of us, and a lot of work that's going to happen long after our time here. But I did want to just throw that out, because I think I like to remember that. I like to remember that I'm an animal and a mammal, like all of the other animals and all of the other mammals. I can do some specialized things. I can't do what cheetahs do. I can't do what cattle do. I can't do what leopard frogs do. But I do have some specialized skills and attributes as a member of this particular species. Not better than, but definitely different. But I like to remember that I am a part of this, and that we're all in this story together. And I'm also telling you that because I want to put that in the context of overall wellness and the science of feeling better, and this idea of bottom up processing. And I think that if this can make sense to anybody, I think it really can make sense to us as agricultural people, because we work with land and we work with other animals, and we have this very often grounded experience of having those kinds of communications that are actually outside of language. And that's really helpful to know, because just like all of the other animals and just like all of the other mammals, we have an autonomic nervous system that is absolutely essential in running our basic utilities, like our heart rate without having to think about it, our breathing without having to think about it, our digestive system, our reproductive system, um, all of these things, just like all of the other animals that we work with. And I'm going to spend just maybe 5 minutes, not even, in giving you the world's shortest version of Dr. Stephan Porges' polyvagal theory, which is complex and very rich and very interesting. And I was thinking too that I don't have this all ready right now, but I could certainly send some links or share some links for any of this information if anybody feels that it would be helpful for them going forward, or if you're just even interested in the science of stress response, the science of anxiety, the science of how we respond in an embodied way to our environment and everything and everybody in it 24 hours a day. So basically, we have, and I'm about to tell you things that you already know. We already know this because we're human. And we also already know this because we actually talk about this all the time in popular culture, but just in a different kind of way. So I don't think this will come as a surprise to any of you. You know as much about this as I do, just differently. So our autonomic nervous system predates us as a species. It's about 5 million years old. It goes all the way back to a time when the first vertebrate beings came upon the scene. As soon as there was a spine, there was an autonomic nervous system. We have three subsystems in our system: oldest to newest, not worst to best. And that's good for us to remember. The oldest part of our system is called the dorsal vagal system, and it is entirely responsible for our ability to freeze in the face of danger. It's where we go when we're in shock. Our system releases all kinds of analgesics, and it allows us to be in this numbed out conservation state, which is meant to be very short lived, i.e., I freeze when a bigger fish comes along, and then once the danger is past, I go about my way. Or I freeze when a bigger fish comes along, and if the fish attacks me and devours me, I have all these analgesics going through my system so that it makes it actually easier for me. That's the basic function of that system. It's very ancient. And so it is responsible for, and you've heard this, freeze. That's our freeze subsystem. And the next newest part of our system is the sympathetic part of our nervous system, which is entirely responsible for our ability to flee or fight, to flee or protect ourselves. Our flee is our first point. This is the first place we want to go, is run away, not fight. So that's kind of interesting. So in the face of danger, and you can see how it made us really successful, and other animals, mammals, successful as a species, because now we're able to live to run away and or to protect ourselves to the point where we can live to fight another day and thrive. And the newest part of our system is the ventral vagal system, and it's our social connection system. It's what made us, it's about 2 million years old, and it's what made us really, it's made us very successful as mammals. It's made mammals really successful because it's entirely responsible for our ability to feel connected and safe. Connected enough to ourselves, i.e., feeling like we're actually in our bodies when we need to be and want to be, and connected to others. So that social connection part of our system allows us to have attachment with other human beings, especially with newborns. It's the first thing that we need to be able to figure out when we arrive on the scene is, am I safe? And is somebody here for me? That's what our nervous system would be asking if it could speak. And this is the thing about our autonomic nervous system, is that it's a non-language system. It doesn't speak English or Spanish or Cree or Urdu. It doesn't speak those languages. And it's great for us to know this, because what's happened is, and what Dr. Porges would say, and his work is about 45 years old, so it's not like it's new, but he would say that when we look back over the last 500 years of information about top-down processing and our ability to use our prefrontal cortex, especially as the control center for everything else that goes on in our system, that actually, when you look at our operating system, when you look at our autonomic nervous system, which is the wiring, we're not actually wired that way. It's not that our brains aren't extremely important, but there's a lot of messages that travel from other places in our body to our brain. Our viscera is a great example of that. Our viscera is packed full of thousands of neurons. This is why we have these gut experiences before we even find language or emotion for what's going on. So we all have heard about this, the freeze response, the fight and flight response, and the social connection piece. And here's what I would say, that like other mammals, we are hardwired to connect and find cues of safety. We are also hardwired to identify any potential danger or threat in our environment, regardless of what kind of form it comes in, and regardless as to whether or not it's actually happening. And so we're really, really good at this, very good at it. Our systems are designed to move in and out of nervous system states and utilize the subsystem that we need whenever we need it for whatever we need it for. The problem is this with humans, and this is the basis of this whole idea of polyvagal theory, is that unlike animals in the wild who are able to get away somehow from a predator and complete a protection response, so that they're able to use those systems of freezing, fleeing, and fighting in the short periods of time that we need them for. We get stuck in there because our problems are different. Our predators are same but different. And it really speaks, when Darren was pointing out, for example, and you spoke to this, many of you, that we're faced with a reality in this province, for example, we are faced with this reality universally, but as it was pointed out, what happens to us when we're living under the stress, the complex stress of having a zero net income? What happens to us when we have fewer and fewer farmers on the land and more corporate control? What we all know what the answer to that question is. We all know what's happened in our rural communities. We all know about having to have at least one person work off the farm in order to make it go. We know all of these things. So we come by our problems honestly. And what I would say to everybody is that if you're noticing that even if everything was going along just fine, that especially lately, there is a certain higher level of discomfort or feeling of disconnection, that I would really want you to know that from this perspective of how our system works, that it makes a lot of sense. I know it's not pleasant or enjoyable, but it makes a lot of sense because we're under a lot of stress. And our system is so amazing and so resilient that it is always trying to protect us, to complete a protective response so that we can go back up to that place of comfort and social engagement. Because that connection is absolutely essential to us. This notion of rugged individualism is a cultivated, socially constructed beast. And anyone who's ever delved a little bit into Darwin's Origin of the Species will find that he talks about cooperation 50 times more than he talks about individualism in terms of success for any species, for any beings. That it really is about that. So our system is this. Our system is a restorative, healing, resilient system that will continue to try and help us feel better. And I also truly believe that because the system is so good at this, that there's a lot of what I would think of as medicine in there that we can access. And that it's not as complicated as one would think. So it's always trying to bring us back home to our embodied selves, because that is the place that we feel the very best. And here's how we know we're here. We know we're there because our heart rate and our respiration are within some manageable window. And we all know we don't have to know what that should be like to know what it is like for each and every one of us. We all can tell when we can breathe a little easier, and we can all tell when our heart rate feels like it's relatively normal. We can tell when there's an absence of tension in our bodies, and we can tell when we're able to pay attention. Because that's the other thing, is that social engagement system is, the other two are not about connection, because our system is engaged in doing something else that's really, really important, and that is protecting us by getting us away from something that feels threatening, protecting us by being able to physically, emotionally protect us, or taking us down into this conservation state where we just stay really small and quiet until something goes away and we can mobilize and then go back to feeling better again. So we have been taught for a really long time that everything is mind over matter, and the science shows that that is actually just simply not the case in terms of how we're wired. So there's this bottom-up processing that's available to us. And I would say that I also think that these are really fancy ways of talking about things that you already know about and that we already do. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of those things that I don't think will come as a surprise. We're faced with some very big challenges. There still are things that we can do to feel better and to work with our system in a way that helps us to feel like things are more manageable and a little bit calmer, even when they're not. So what I mean by that is the things that you already know about, the things, especially during this pandemic and during this time of loss, the things that keep us connected to ourselves and others, our creative pursuits, being able to read a good book, being able to talk to a friend on the phone, or your sister, or your brother, or your grandmother, being able to be with your animals in a way that's really comforting for you and for them, being able to do things like walk, preferably outside, maybe with others, maybe on our own. For some people, it's being able to, and even during the pandemic, sometimes we can do this, sometimes we can't. It depends on what's available to us, but being able to do some yoga if that's something that you like to do or it's something that's interesting to you, or other ways of gently stretching and moving our bodies. Because when we talk about a bottom-up process, we're talking about working with our body first, because we want to follow the way we want to follow the pathway that the wiring is going. So there are some other ways we can do this. And two in particular, and again, some of this might be new, but not new because you do it all the time. We do it all the time. We do it automatically. Some of it has to do with breathing, and some of it has to do with getting oriented. So we are constantly getting ourselves oriented to what's going on around us. And you'll see me, I'm turning my head, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. And as far as our construction goes, this is called orienting architecture. This thing that we do when we look around, if we are sighted, but even if we're not, the way we look around and the way we use our ability to hear, see, touch, taste, smell as a way to locate ourselves in our environment at any given time. We do it when we're startled by something so that we can figure out what we need to attend to. We do it after we realize that we're okay and things have settled, or after having to respond to something stressful. We get oriented again. So we're always doing this. And the reason I'm mentioning orientation, and I'm going to show it to you in a kind of a specific way, is because when we're really caught up in a lot of flight and fight, which is where anxiety and worry shows up for us, and it shows up in those physical sensations, and it shows up in emotions and thoughts as well. Or when we're really feeling like we're right down there in the basement and we don't really have very much energy, the first thing we want to be able to do to get back here is to get oriented. So we do this orientation thing all the time, and we can also do it on purpose as a way to get back in here a little bit more, because here's what's going to happen is I will be able to think more clearly and slow my thoughts down when my heart rate and my respiration are within a coherent, manageable window. If not, I'm going to be telling myself to calm down, and I'm going to ask you to answer this question for yourselves. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the situation itself doesn't match how anxious or worried or concerned you might feel in your body? And you're telling yourself, just calm down, just calm down, just calm down, and it's not working. It's not working. And then we start to think, we might, if you were anything like me, you might start thinking, what is going on? Why can't I use my mind to calm this situation down? I mean, intellectually, I know this probably isn't a big deal, or I know it is a big deal, but I also know I need to be able to manage it. But I'm telling myself to do that, and it's not working. So, for the basic reason that my heart and my lungs don't speak English or Cree or Spanish or any other of the languages that we've come up with, um, they speak the language of sensation. And when my heart rate and my breathing come down to an acceptable level, then all of a sudden I can think a little bit more clearly. I can feel a little bit more connected, and I can get myself a little more oriented. So it goes like this. Here's a quick orientation. And if people like it, I can send it to you, but it's also pretty easy to remember, but I know we've also had long days. And it goes like this. I'm going to have a look around, and I'm going to notice a few details that have to do with color, light, shape, contour. Now, I'm not going to tell you a story about what I see. I'm just going to tell you that I can see things like I can see the contrast between the baseboards, which are wood, and the wall, which is white. And I can see the light shining in the bookshelf, and I can see that the books are all different colors. And it seems like such a silly thing and simple thing, but it translates to quite a bit on the inside. It helps my system know that I'm here in this place in this time. And I'm going to do that a few times. And then I'm going to notice, and you can do this too if you like right now, I'm going to notice how I feel from the outside in. So I'm going to notice how my skin feels first, my wrapper, my largest organ. And when I say that, I mean things, simple things like I can feel the pressure of my feet touching the floor. And I can feel the sleeve of my shirt on my arm. And I can feel that there's a little tickle at the back of my neck. And that's all I need to know. It's again, it seems so simple, but our systems are so highly attuned and want so badly to be oriented that they go to that automatically. So I'm going to notice that, just my skin, and I'm going to have another look around and notice a few things that tell me I am where I am right now. Simple things. Maybe it's things I smell, see, hear, taste. And then if I wanted to, I could come back and I could just notice, how do I feel a little bit? If I check head to toes on the inside, what am I noticing? And I might notice things like, well, my stomach feels kind of empty. And I have a little bit of tension in my shoulders. And instead of getting really concerned about that, and this is where this can be really helpful with chronic pain, is instead of getting all tied up in that, and this is not a distraction technique, I'm going to notice that stuff on the inside, and then I'm going to have another look around and notice a few things on the outside, like the brightness of the lights and the fact that there's a green wall and a white wall. And then I'm going to check back on the inside. And I happen to notice when I check back on the inside that things feel just, I'm going to see if they feel any different. maybe even a little bit better. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. So I'm going to keep doing this pendulum thing that I do where I look out, check what's going on the outside, and check what's going on the inside. So that is called orientation and tracking. I'd be happy to send it to you. I know it doesn't seem like it solves the world's problems, but we really, really do have this amazingly resilient system that will work with us when we work with it. And what I love about working with things from the bottom up is I don't have to think about it too much. It's one less thing to think about. So the other piece I just wanted to share with you quickly is about breathing. I know we talk about it all the time. Oh, and that thing, if I'm really stressed out or even a little stressed out and someone tells me to just breathe or I tell myself to breathe, it doesn't go over that well. Right? I think one of the worst things we could say to people, and I've said it a million times, is just calm down. Like, it's really not a good idea because the system, my whole system is saying, are you kidding? Calm down. We have something really big we need to respond to here. So, I know, again, it doesn't seem like much, but it's really essential. There's a whole superhighway of nerves back here that are directly connected, that run down, that communicate between our brain, but run down through our lungs, through our diaphragm, through our heart, and into our gut. This breathing thing is really, really important. There's a great way to do this. It's called 4-7-11. And what that means is I'm going to breathe in for 4 through my nose. I'm going to breathe out for 7 through my mouth. And I'm going to do it 11 times. Because that's about how long it takes to actually have things settle down. And if we just do it 3 times, we will feel better. It's sort of like antibiotics, you know, when they tell you to take them all. Not that I'm a fan, but you know the deal. That if we keep going for 11, no matter what's going on, our heart rate will settle down. The constriction around our respiration will settle down, believe it or not. And if nothing else, these are these ways that we can settle the system enough that then we can have a little more clarity of thought.
Thank you very much,